Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into the latest U.S. employment report, specifically the data covering December that we all got in January.
Right.
And on the surface, if you just read the headlines, the report was remarkably, I think perhaps deceptively, stable. Non-farm payroll, it increased a little. Unemployment held steady, and the superficial assessment was, frankly, extremely boring. No major collapse.
And that's the thing.
The headline narrative, what we call the N layer, is just employment is solid. The soft landing continues.
And that end layer narrative that everything is okay because the statistics are holding, that's precisely why we need to do this deep dive.
Exactly.
Our sources are pointing to this really critical structural disconnect. I mean, when you actually talk to households, when you look at the qualitative data, you find this pervasive anxiety.
So the numbers are fine, but the feeling isn't.
The statistical stability is, in a way, violating the lived experience of stagnation.
That structural friction, that violation, that's the core mission of our deep dive today.
Exactly. Our objective is to understand the physics of that friction, what we're calling structural shear. And before we get into the data, maybe we should quickly define the 3 analytical layers we're using.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're key to this. We are looking beyond just the numbers.
Correct. So the N layer is the narrative. That's the headline, the immediate market reaction.
Got it.
Then there's the I layer. That's the institutional response. Think policymakers, the Fed, looking at the data, unemployment, inflation, and deciding whether or not to act.
And the last one.
And finally, the L layer, which is the lived experience. The reality for a family trying to pay rent or save for college or, make a down payment.
And the problem is?
The problem is the I layer is currently only listening to the N layer, while the L layer is screaming something else entirely. Our mission is just to look at the structure of this friction. We're not assigning blame or making big predictions.
Just analyzing the system as it is.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start by challenging that stability of the N-layer narrative. In part 1, the data really does seem resilient on paper.
It does.
The overall non-farm payroll count is still positive. That means job counts are being maintained, and the unemployment rate isn't, rapidly spiking. If you only look at those metrics, the system looks pretty healthy.
It appears resilient, yeah. But that stability, it masks what our sources describe as a major qualitative decay in the labor market.
Qualitative decay, what do you mean by that?
We're in a state where job creation hasn't stopped, but the employment pathways are drastically narrowed.
Okay.
Think of the job market less like a superhighway where you can just easily change lanes and more like a single-lane funnel.
A funnel. What does that funnel look like specifically? Where's all the concentration happening?
It's highly concentrated in just a few specific service sectors. We're seeing robust, continued hiring in, say, non-discretionary services.
Like what?
Medical and healthcare support. And then in lower wage, high turnover services like leisure and hospitality. So restaurants, hotels, entertainment venues, these sectors are absorbing almost all the net job growth.
But if we're talking about generating widespread prosperity, those sectors have, historically struggled to deliver the kind of high wages and career progression that really supports a middle-class lifestyle.
That is the essential insight.
They're necessary jobs, but they're not traditionally drivers of mobility.
Exactly. The sectors that typically spread prosperity widely, the ones that pay enough to afford a mortgage or, transition from renter to homeowner, those are weak.
So where are we seeing that weakness?
We're seeing continued weakness or just stagnant employment in manufacturing, warehousing, trucking, professional office administration, and retail.
Can you ground that difference for us? What does that mean for a worker on the ground?
Okay, so imagine a laid-off warehouse worker. They were making, say, $26 an hour with solid benefits, maybe relying on that schedule stability to manage childcare.
Right, a stable middle-income job.
When they go look for a comparable job, the market just doesn't have many options in that $25 to $30 range. Instead, the available jobs are at a new urgent care clinic or maybe a luxury hotel.
And the pay.
It's often paying $16 to $18 an hour, with much less certainty on the hours.
So the worker isn't unemployed, which is key. They avoid that metric. But their household income just dropped by 30, maybe 40%, and their career trajectory has just stalled.
Precisely.
They have a job, but their life is actually moving backward.
That's it. Jobs exist, but the quality jobs necessary to move life forward, to make those big debt-fueled investments that define progress, they're not increasing.
And this is why the unemployment rate, our main metric, is so insensitive to this.
It is structurally insensitive to this critical qualitative shift. It measures the quantity of available slots, not the quality or the breadth of opportunity. You can have statistical stability while simultaneously experiencing a structural funneling of labor that just degrades the L layer.
That structural funneling, it brings us directly to part 2, where we talk about time.
Yeah.
This qualitative degradation is made worse by a speed mismatch.
Right.
And this creates the structural shear we mentioned earlier.
This is where we look at the world as operating through different operating systems or OS layers, and each one is running at a different clock speed.
Right, so on the macro speeds, you have the financial OS, which is hyperfast. Financial markets, algorithms, they operate day to day, even second to second.
Instantaneous.
Then the policy and institutional OS, like central banks or governments, they operate on a much slower cycle, quarterly, yearly.
Yeah, much slower.
But the slowest of all is the life OS. The pace of changing a family's fortunes, paying off debt, saving for retirement, that takes years, decades.
And the friction between the two fastest layers, finance and policy, and that slowest layer, life, that's where the structural shear happens. If you imagine two massive tectonic plates grinding past each other, the pressure and energy that builds up is the shear.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at how the high-speed financial OS reacted to that stable but qualitatively weak employment report.
The market reaction was instantaneous and completely counterintuitive to most people.
Oh.
Employment deceleration, even if it's just a slow slowdown, is immediately interpreted by the market as potential rate cut leeway.
Oh.
The fast-moving financial layer is already calculating and pricing in the next phase based on this expectation. They treat not too bad figures as positive material.
Because it means the Federal Reserve might ease policy sooner, which is good for asset prices.
Exactly. So the fast layer is flying forward, full of this speculative optimism about future monetary conditions. They're essentially reading bad news for the worker as good news for the investor.
They're reacting ahead of time, running simulations on conditions that haven't even happened yet.
That's the key distinction. But now let's look at the slow speed, the life OS. While the market is pricing in future cuts, households remain deeply cautious.
And that caution is driven by the reality of those narrow employment pathways we just talked about.
And the uncertain long-term prospects, yeah.
But why are they so cautious if wages are, on average, rising slightly?
The uncertainty is paramount. I mean, if you're struggling with high interest rates on credit cards and a tight budget, the risk associated with moving or changing jobs or committing to a major purchase like a new car or a home, it's exponentially higher.
So a small wage increase just doesn't cover that risk.
Not at all. It doesn't compensate for the risk of stepping onto a precarious new career path. This environment, it actively lowers labor fluidity. People are staying put.
Often in jobs that aren't advancing their long-term goals.
Yes, simply because the known certainty, even if that certainty is stagnation, outweighs the potential risk of seeking a new opportunity.
So you have the market hitting the accelerator,
Mm-hmm.
and the household sector is simultaneously hitting the emergency brake on major life decisions.
And that enormous difference in reaction speed is the structural shear itself.
It must create tremendous friction.
It creates friction and heat. The information space contains this simultaneous, intense optimism from the fast-moving market and this pervasive anxiety from the slow-moving household sector.
And that friction, that sheer heat,
Yeah.
it doesn't show up as a recession indicator.
No, instead it boils over, and you see it manifesting in the intense polarization and societal fragmentation we're all watching in politics and media. The frustration has to go somewhere.
If this speed difference is causing so much friction, where do we see the evidence? This brings us to part 3, what we're calling the strange silence.
Right?
You'd expect a louder, more unified outcry if life is truly stagnating for so many people. But certain demographic layers are surprisingly quiet. Our sources call this phenomenon calcification.
The silence is one of the most compelling pieces of structural evidence. Historically, the groups most affected by economic dislocation, young people entering the workforce, low-wage service workers, people in non-urban areas, they would be vocal.
And they're not. So if the anxiety is present in the L layer, what explains this muted response? Why aren't we seeing protests or demands for dramatic change?
It connects directly back to the metrics. Because the unemployment rate has not surged, because the system is stable on paper, the anxieties of these groups are completely invisible to the I layer, to the institutions.
Their frustration is being internalized.
Exactly. We call it calcification because the pressure is solidifying in silence. It's like a closed system where internal pressure just keeps building without any external release.
So the statistical blind spot means that because the crisis hasn't reached a headline-grabbing level, the internal pressure just builds.
Yeah.
It manifests not as public resistance, but as private retreat.
Precisely. I mean, think about the L-layer behaviors. It's all about delayed major life choices.
Right.
These groups aren't protesting in the streets. They're simply retreating from risk. They're delaying homeownership, delaying marriage, staying at home longer with their parents, delaying having children.
And opting out of riskier career moves or entrepreneurship.
Yes. And this structural implication is critical. This muted response does not mean there's no internal crisis. It means the crack is growing internally.
And this silent retreat is compounded by what we call the compatibility error. The fact that the rationality driving corporate decisions and the rationality driving household decisions are just fundamentally drifting apart. Both sides are acting rationally.
But they're being rational in two different worlds.
Let's look at corporate rationality first.
Okay, so for large companies, the decision to maintain efficiency and minimize hiring, we call that a correct management judgment.
It's the right move for them.
It is. They look at a complex global environment, high cost of capital, uncertain policy direction, geopolitical instability, and most importantly, the growing risk of AI substitution.
Wait, but isn't postponing hiring counterproductive to long-term growth? Why is maximizing output now the rational choice?
Because uncertainty is prioritized above everything else. Hiring is a long-term liability.
I see.
So companies prioritize existing staff optimization. They use temporary or contract solutions where possible because they need to be maximally agile to face the next policy shift or technological disruption.
So their management imperative is to minimize human capital risk and maximize current output now, not to invest in future expansion.
That is rational for the corporation.
That makes perfect sense from an efficiency standpoint, maximizing the company's ability to survive turbulence. But what about household rationality?
Well, the worker sees this corporate caution. They see the job funnel narrowing. So their rational response is to postpone major life decisions, delaying moving, avoiding career risk, deferring large purchases.
Their rationality is driven by the reality that their efforts, even if they're working hard, are not leading to life improvement.
Or the ability to confidently plan for a stable future.
So these two forces, corporate efficiency and worker risk aversion, they're not in active conflict.
No, not at all.
They are simply acting rationally based on their own operating environments, but those environments are fundamentally misaligned. That's the error.
They are passing each other by while coexisting. The corporation's optimized actions prevent life from improving for the worker, even though those actions are financially sound for the corporation. The economy works for the efficient firm.
But that efficiency creates stagnation for the worker.
Which means the L layer struggles even when the N layer is stable.
So what does this all mean for us? Let's bring it back to the core thesis of this whole deep dive. We are not framing a definitive recession narrative here.
No, that's not the point.
The observation is that maintaining employment is now structurally separate from allowing life to progress.
That is the essential takeaway. We've reached a point where the L layer, the life impact, is high, but the policy system, the I layer, continues to judge that it's still okay.
Because the N layer data is stable.
Exactly. We have to understand that a maintained employment level and a life that moves forward are no longer the same condition.
This sounds less like a cyclical downturn and more like a permanent shift in how the economy functions for the average person, a kind of precarious structural equilibrium.
It is. The overall state of the system suggests that even when unemployment and job numbers are stable, it is entirely possible for the life membrane to be stretched to the point of breaking, for judgments to be retained, postponed indefinitely, and for productive actions to decrease.
So the real danger is?
Our structural analysis suggests that the true danger is that life stops before the numbers collapse.
That's a powerful and, frankly, a pretty sobering way to put it. So instead of waiting for a dramatic statistical collapse like unemployment surging past 6 or 7%, what subtle signs should you, the listener, watch next to anticipate this shift in lived experience?
We need to look for the microsignals, the signs that slow internal crack is widening.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, look for which specific industries start showing an increase in hiring freezes. Not headline layoffs, but a complete stop in hiring to backfill vacant roles.
Okay, hiring freezes. What's next?
Second, watch the youth unemployment rates and the rate of labor force participation for young adults. That group is the first to suffer from this calcification in silence.
And the last one?
Finally, pay attention to the capacity of the public sector. If state and local governments start pulling back on services, that signals that the last major shock absorber for labor demand is failing.
So those are the indicators.
Those indicators will tell you that the structural stalling is accelerating regardless of what the headline job count says.